Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm the face behind Duffy's Craft Days, and today I'm going to be showing you how to insert a zip into a knitted or crocheted pouch or bag. Okay, so this is a pouch that I've already inserted a zipper into. It's a longer pouch that I'm going to show you today, but you can see it's not lined. You can line the pouch or the bag after you've added the zip. That's quite simple to do. But I just wanted to show you how I insert my zips. I have used this method for quite a long time, and I find it's the easiest method for me personally, so I wanted to share that today. So the first thing that you're going to need is obviously your finished pouch or bag. So this one has been knitted in moss stitch. I've seamed up the sides, and now we're going to add our zip. So you're going to need a zip, obviously. Now the colour of yarn that I've used is called Jewel. It's a Paint Box Yarns Simply Chunky, and I think it's a kind of tealy colour, so I went with a teal coloured zip. The zip is from Opti. I purchased it from eBay. Now the pouch is around about 20 centimetres, and I've gone with a 25 centimetre zip, which might seem a bit strange, but you can cut off the excess afterwards. So I prefer to go with one that's slightly bigger to get a good fit. Okay, so you're also going to need some thread. So again, I've got a teal coloured, just ordinary sewing thread that I'll be using. Needles, sewing needles, because you only need one, not the whole pack. And then these little sewing clips here. So you can pick these up in various places. I'm sure they sell them on Amazon. I tend to pick them up in my local shop. Okay, so zips tend to have a little staple in the label, so I'm just going to use my staple remover to pull that out and get that label off. And then I'm going to open up the zip, and we're going to use our clips to secure it in place. So I'm going to take it just ever so slightly back up like that, and that end will just get popped in against the side there, and we can then start using our clips to secure it. So I line up the actual zip with the top of the bag like this, and just go along without stretching the fabric, the knitted or crocheted fabric. Try and keep that unstretched. And I just go, I don't know, about every inch or so, every couple of centimetres, depending on which you prefer to use. I'm just going to go all the way along, making sure that that zip stays flush with the top of the bag. So you'll notice that I've got quite an excess here. Don't worry about that, because we'll deal with that afterwards. So then I'm just going to go along the other side, just keeping that zip nice and even, because you don't want a wobbly zip. Now obviously your cast on edge is going to look a little bit different to your cast off edge. That it's not a major issue. It's just the way it is. I'm just going to go along again, just securing that zip in place. Again, just making sure that the top of the zip stays flush with the top of the pouch. Okay, so what I do next, and I know it's not what everybody does, is I actually turn the pouch inside out, because I just think it's easier to sew that way. Okay, and then I will start at this edge here, so the bottom of the zip. And I tend to go, I don't know, about 1/2 centimetre probably underneath where the zip actually is sitting, the top of the zip, so halfway between the top of the zip and the edge of the tape. So I use a back stitch, and I'm actually going to start by just coming up through the bottom of the zip like so. These little bits can be snipped off afterwards, and I just pop my finger in there so that I can feel, don't know how well that's coming across, but I want to make sure that I have got the fabric of the bag underneath where I'm stitching, and we are just going to do little terrible English little back stitches along this zip. And if you have picked a zip and thread that match fairly closely to your yarn, you're not going to need to worry about it showing through. But what I do try and do is actually catch the yarns, how am I going to explain that? So rather than going all the way through the knitted fabric, I try, just get a bit that's a bit easier to see, and just go about halfway through the depth of that knitted fabric so that you don't actually see the needle coming through. Hold that a bit closer so you can see, hopefully. You don't see the needle coming through, but it has definitely caught that fabric. So we're just going to go all the way along, doing these little back stitches, picking up that fabric. And generally you can tell that it's caught the fabric, otherwise your zip's just going to be sort of a bit floppy, not really attached to anything. And then as I work along, I just remove those clips and just hold it between my thumb and forefinger. I also find it's easier to feel the fabric that way. So this is probably the hardest bit around the ends, but along the length of it is nice and easy. So I shall carry on working my way along, making sure as I go that that zip stays flush with the top of the pouch. And I'm just going to stitch until I reach my side seam here. Now, don't worry if your stitching isn't perfectly straight. I don't think mine is either, to be honest, but I actually think that's the beauty of handmade. You're not trying to replicate a factory or machine-made item. You want people to know that it's handmade, and I think that okay, so that's one side all stitched on, as you can see, and then I'm just going to repeat the process going back from the stopper end down to the bottom end of the zip, just because that's the way I stitch. I'm right-handed, so I find that easier. So again, I'll be starting at the side seam here and just working back along to the other end. What's going to happen as we get towards the end here is this zip is going to try and move positions. So I'm just going to do it up a little bit, literally just line it back up with the top there. Just be super, super careful that you're only picking up the yarn on this side of the bag and you're not picking it up from that side. Just work towards that seam, that side seam of the bag. So before I fasten off this yarn, sorry, not yarn, this thread, just double check that I haven't caught this side of the bag with the needle. Because we don't want to be pulling the yarn on either side. So I will just continue. Whilst the zip is still open at the back there, I am just going to pop my finger in behind the other side, or this side of the bag, sort of in between the two halves, just to make sure that I'm not catching that, that other side of the bag. And I'm just going to work back to that side seam. Okay, and when I hit the side seam, I'm just going to fold that zip over. And I'm actually going to go through the seam, through that seam with the needle, like that, and then continue stitching from this side. And I can now pop my finger in to the open end of the zip and stitch along, making sure I'm not catching the wrong side of the bag. Just going to stitch along until I meet the stitching I started with. What I'll do then is just take the needle back through the zipper tape, not getting the yarn, and we can cut, just tie that off between the zipper tape and the bag. So, okay, and then we'll just cut those threads. Okay, so that's the zipper tape in place, but as you can see, we've still got this tape here to deal with. So what I tend to do is just cross them over and stitch them in place. So I don't need to turn the bag inside out for this. I can literally just cross them over. I'm just going to go through the zipper tape at the back with my needle to start with. Okay, just to get me started. Okay, and I'm literally going to stitch down through the side seam here. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going into the back there, going into that side seam, doing my usual trick of catching the zipper tape. Okay, and I will continue just working down into that side seam through the zipper tape. If you're planning on lining your bag, then this really has not got to be the perfect stitching. When you line it, it will need to be. If you're leaving your bag unlined, then you do need to take a bit more care with your stitching. Depending on, I mean, if you're just doing the bag for yourself, then whatever you're happy with, I guess. If you're gifting it, you're probably going to want to be a bit more careful. And if you're planning to sell your bags, then you will definitely want to be super, super neat. Just working it back through a few times just to really secure it, because what we will then be doing is actually cutting the ends of these tapes off. So we want to make sure that we've got it really secure all the way through the zipper tape. And well anchored to the bag itself as well. I'm just going to finish by actually going over the top of that zipper tape a couple of times to act as a bit of a stopper to make sure it doesn't try and keep going. Okay, so before I cut my thread, just want to check that that is working nicely. Actually it is. One zipper inserted nicely. So in it to secure, or a couple of knots. I always like to do a couple, just to make sure it's really secure. And then you can snip off the ends of your thread. And I'm actually going to use a super sharp pair of scissors, which I will grab. Just to cut that zipper tape, because what you don't want is that fraying inside the bag. And we're just going to cut the excess off. I have a nice clean cut, like so. And then you have a nice secure zip pouch, knitted zipper pouch. So if you've enjoyed that mini tutorial, then please like below, and if you want to be notified of future tutorials, then please hit subscribe. Thank you for watching.